to be here. Thank you everyone for joining me. Hello. This is Siftach's new location. We're going to dedicate today's shiur to Sheina Chava Bas Rasa Gittel for a successful procedure, Refuah Shalema, only Yeshuot, and anyone else who needs a bracha at any time. Today's learning should be in their schus. I know there was someone else I had in mind, and I blanked out on who it is. Oh, for Chaim Kasnet, whose yahrzeit is right around now. Okay. This parsha is really cool. We are finishing the third Chumash, Vayikra. Behar B'chukosai ends Chazak B'nez Chazik, and then we're going to be starting Bamidbar next week. So at the end of this parsha, we're going to mostly focus on Behar. B'chukosai is the curses. It's the curses and the blessings, right? It says, In B'chukosai Telechu, if you will go my ways, and here's all the blessings, and if not, here's the curses, the negative things that will happen, and we've other classes on that, but I'd rather focus on Behar today. Okay, so because Behar mostly speaks about, the word Behar, what does Behar mean? It says, the beginning of the Parsha says, Hashem spoke to Moshe, Behar Sinai, by Har Sinai, saying. So, Har Sinai is what the Parsha is chosen to be named after. The word Behar specifically is on a mountain. So actually, we could summarize this entire Parsha by the concept of a mountain and why the Torah was given on a mountain, right? Why wasn't it given by an ocean, right? Why not given by the splitting of the sea in the desert? Why was it given by a mountain? And why was it given specifically on Har Sinai, right? So that's a little bit about what we're going to be talking about. And just to recap the Parsha speaks about the laws of the Yovel and the laws of the Shmittah. So just like right now, we're in Sfiras Omer, and we have 7 cycles of 7 weeks where we're counting the Sfiras Omer, right? And this week, I believe, we're counting the Sfira of Hod, right? We're working on the Sfira of Hod. The 1, 2 Chesed, right? Vuar Tiferes Netzach hold the 5th Sfira of humility, of appreciation, of gratitude, devotion. So similarly, the world is built on cycles of 7, right? 7 days it took Hashem to create the world. The 7th is always the day of rest. So 6 days of work, 7 days of the 7th day is rest. So just the whole world, the cycles of nature are 7 days in a week. And then we have 7 times 7 that we're counting now to receive the Torah, and on the 49th day we receive the Torah, 7 weeks after we left Mitzrayim. Now similarly, I guess to correspond to that, we also have 7-year cycles, right? 6 years where we work the land, and the 7th year, just like on Shabbos we rest, we have an entire year called Shmittah, right? Where after planting the ground for 6 years, the year number 7, we rest, we don't plant, we don't sow, we don't reap, and we just finished our Shmittah, and we are now in the 8th year, right? And then we have this really cool thing that every 7 Shmittah cycles, so again, 7 years, 7 weeks, right, 7 days in a week, 7 years, 7 times 7 years, after every 7 cycles of Shmittah, we have a year called Yovel-Jubilee. Now, Yovel is like a super Shmittah, and really, in reality, it's a reset on all physical property. It gets a reset. So what happens in the Yovel year, different than the Shmittah year, so we first have the laws of Shmittah, where the land rests, we can't touch the land, we can't farm, we can't produce, we can't work the land, we can't grow the land, and we can't eat any of the food that was grown during that time. And in Yovel, something even larger happens, is that all land that was acquired, that you bought, any land that was bought, returns to its original owner on the 50th year. So land can never actually be moved from owner to owner long term, because in Yovel year, he returns to its original owner. And similarly, so land or houses or any property, actual property that was bought by someone else, that was acquired, is returned on Yovel, which actually meant that when you bought a house, the value, what you pay for the house, would depend on how many years there was left to Yovel. Because if you're buying a house and there's only 2 years you have to Yovel, you're essentially paying much less for the house, right? You could do whatever you want with it, you could rent it out, etc., but it's worth much less. And if you're buying the house now, in the beginning of the next Shemitah cycle, the next Yovel cycle, 50-year cycle, then you're paying a lot more because you have 50 years to develop this land, right? And the next thing that happens in Yovel, the other thing that happens is that all slaves that were bought, because buying slaves was still allowed, even though it was frowned upon tremendously, because Hashem said, I abolished slavery and taking you out of Mitzrayim. This is just to realize that the Torah frowned upon slavery thousands of years before the rest of the world caught up and realized that slavery should be abolished, right? So abolishing slavery has been in our genes, and the Torah said, listen, we can't forbid you because you're going to take slaves anyways, but we frown upon it so much that, first of all, every 7 years a slave has to be returned to its owner, but he could still pierce his ear and then choose to stay longer. if he chooses to stay, if he or she chooses to remain in slavery for whatever reason. They love their slave, they love their owner, they love their master, they have nowhere else to go. They don't rather be with him than be sold to someone else. And on the 50th year, though, everyone must be redeemed from slavery. So there's no slaves left. All slaves go free on the 50th year, which is such a crazy revolutionary idea in those times. It didn't even exist. The idea of abolishing slavery wasn't even heard of until how many years ago was slavery abolished? 100, less than 100 years ago, right? When was the Civil War? Right, so 100 and something years ago, right? 130 years ago, and this is thousands of years ago. So this is this massive reset where everything returns back to its original owner. So first we want to talk about what is the spiritual significance of that. Why is it such a big deal for people to own housing? One part of it is that the land will return to its original shevet, because Hashem intentionally, there was a lottery that decided which part of Eretz Yisrael belonged to which shevet, which Jewish tribe, and it was very deeply connected to their soul, to their source of their soul, right? To who they were spiritually, what their task was in the world, and they were placed in places that would allow them to affect the world and have the greatest effect on their environment and on their own soul and on their own growth based on where they were put. So that was one part of it. But even deeper, the question is why does everything have to return its original owner, right? Why this reset? Especially because people could just sell it right afterwards, right? If they're gonna anyways not want to live there, they're gonna get it back and then resell it to that person again, right? That could happen. That's allowed as long as it returns to its original owner, and then they can choose to do whatever they want with it afterwards. It's theirs. But it has to have that transferring back to its original owner. And slavery, what is the deeper spiritual reason for this? That's one thing we're going to discuss. Now, before that, we're going to talk about the name of the parsha, and it's all going to connect, and it's all really the same idea. The name of the Parshat Behar, the idea of the mountain, all of it really is one deep idea that is so practically empowering to like my life and to hopefully all of our lives. So Parshat Behar says, right, on a mountain. So now we have a question. Har Sinai, it's well known, the Medrash says that Har Sinai was chosen. Why? We've learned this since we're very small children, because it was the humblest of all the mountains. All the other mountains were bragging about their greatness and how the Torah should be given on them. They're more beautiful, they're more large, they're more strong, they're more wide. And Har Sinai was the smallest, it was humble. And therefore the Torah was given on that mountain. And in your source sheets, if you look at the second page, in Gemara Megillah, it says, in Tehillim, it says, Lama tiratztun harim gavnunim. Why do you look askance? Why do you run about making yourself so great? Oh, you high-peaked mountains, right? A Baskal came out and said, Lama tirtzu din in Sinai. Why are you looking for a legal dispute with Har Sinai? They were saying we should have gotten the mountain. Why is Har Sinai chosen? She's so much smaller. And over there, the Gemara learns from that what do you mean high-peaked mountains? From there we learn that they're blemished. They have a Baal Mum. It says you're the ones, kulchem bali mumim. All of you are blemished. All of you are flawed. Don't think you're so perfect. You're flawed. At Sinai, near Sinai, you're completely flawed. Like it says, gavnunim. And also that's by one of the sources why we eat dairy on one of the reasons we eat dairy on Simchas on Shavuos is because gavnunim is gvina. So harim gavnunim, the cheesy mountains. The Gemara continues and it says. In Vayikra it says Hacha Gavnunim the Ksiv Hatam, that over there Gavnunim also comes from the crook from the root word crooked as well. So to show what does the Gemara learn from this, the Rav Ashi learns from this that one who is arrogant is considered a Baal Mum, that someone who thinks of themselves as greater is a Baal Mum, is blemished. So we learn from this that Har Sinai, this is one of the sources that Har Sinai was picked to be chosen because of its humility, because it didn't hold itself high, it didn't hold itself great, it wasn't high-peaked. So someone who thinks that he's greater than other people is blemished, right? And we all can acknowledge that. We all know that when people come and praise themselves and say how great they are, well, they think that they're making themselves more desirable. In usually we feel repulsed by that, right? It's a blemish on the person. It's not something that draws us to a person, rather it's a blemish on the person. So the Gemara now continues. So now we have this question on that. So if Har Sinai was chosen because it was the lowest mountain of all, and it was Sinai, it was humble and humility, and we learn from this, right, that we should be humble as well, then that was the message of the whole Torah, that we should learn humility, and Hashem chose the humblest of mountains. Then why was the Torah given on a mountain at all? Right? A mountain is someone that feels themselves to be great. It should be given at least on flat land, right? The Torah should be given somewhere very flat to show that everyone is equal. You don't have to be great. You shouldn't make yourselves great at all. Why even a small mountain? In fact, if you want to really show humility, give it on a valley, right? Like actually the curses were actually given on a valley, right? In next week's Parsha, in this week when we're learning B'chakosai, in the second Parsha this week. So the question is a deeper question, not just about mountains. It's about whether there's worth and value in feeling pride, in feeling like a mountain. So mountain, and then this really ties back to Pesach, right? Because we're coming out of Pesach, and Pesach was all about humility. We said that matzah, the difference between chametz and matzah is actually, it's exactly the same ingredients. In fact, it's the same letters. Matzah and chametz have exactly the same letters. The only thing that's different is the chet and the hey, and one is inflated and feels like full and proud like a mountain, and one is flattened. So what's greater, matzah? Right? Is there value? Obviously, matzah is important, but the question asked about Pesach was, why don't we have matzah all year long? Why eat chametz? If chametz is so evil, if chametz is the root of ego and pride and inflated self, an inflated sense of self that's truly not real, that's just empty air, then shouldn't we have chametz? Shouldn't we have a matzah the entire year and avoid chametz? But we actually learned over there, and we continue to learn now, that it's not that simple. That the balance between pride and humility is not as simple as just always being flat, because we learned that it's also dangerous to be too humble. Because if we feel too humble, and the Chachamim discusses in the Gemara, there's also a danger. For example, it says that Moshe was actually punished for being too humble, right? We discussed this not too long ago, that Moshe, when Hashem asked him to become the leader and to take the people out of Egypt, because he felt so small and incapable and unworthy, he argued with Hashem for a week. He didn't want to go for a week. He kept saying, I'm not good enough. So his lack of sense of pride of himself, or sense of knowledge of his greatness, or feeling didn't allow him to step up to the plate when needed. He felt like someone else should do it. He wanted to push on this job that Hashem is telling him to do something, and he's saying, no, Aaron should do it. Anyone else should do it. I don't want to do it, right? So there's actually something that could be not work for our benefit if we have too much humility and don't recognize the greatness that Hashem gave us. And it's actually, in a way, it's like false, because if Hashem gave you greatness, you have a responsibility to use it. So let's look at the sources in the Gemara. In the sources that I gave you, there's two places. There's a source in Gemara Sota. Gemara Sota, Gemara Saita, page Aleph, Hey, Aleph, page Hey, the first side, Aleph Yod Zayin says, Amar Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak, Lo mine v'lo miktsasa mizutar, not even a smidge of any arrogance, right? D'chsiv bei. You shouldn't even have a part of arrogance. And he quotes from Mishlei, Ta'evas Hashem kol gvalev, that it's abomination. Any proudness of heart is an abomination to Hashem. So that's what he says. Now we continue right afterwards, right? This is the next, or actually the one right before it, the part right before in the Gemara, it says, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rab, that Rav says, Rabbi Chia bar Ashi says the name of Rav, that Talmid Chachamim Sarech Shehei by Echad Mishmeina B'Shminis, that a Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, has to have an eighth of arrogance, of feeling proud of himself. Amar Rabbi Huna, the son of Rabbi Yeshua said, Umeatara lei, and this eighth of arrogance crowns him. It's his crown and it's his glory. Kisasa lishbulasa, like it crowns him like the husk, like the on of the husk, on that crowns a husk, I guess. I don't even know, I guess of a plant, or a grain of wheat, a grain. Amarava said, in his name, De'is be B'Shemasa, that he should be excommunicated. Anyone who has any arrogance should be excommunicated, and if he has no arrogance at all, he should also be excommunicated. So we see now that it's not that simple. On one side, and this is just a little bit of the sources that the Gemara discusses about whether a person should have arrogance. On the one hand, he says he shouldn't even have a smidge of arrogance, and someone else says a Talmud Chacham not only needs to have a tiny bit of arrogance, but this arrogance is what crowns him. This arrogance allows him to be like this on his husk. And then we have Rava saying that someone who has no arrogance should be excommunicated, and someone who has arrogance should also be excommunicated. So which one is it? So we actually learned that it's like a tightrope. It's a fine line that we have to constantly try our best to balance, this fine line. And in fact, it's wrong to say that we should have no arrogance at all, because the problem with having no arrogance at all is that we would feel incapable, that when Hashem calls upon us, when life calls upon us to step up to the plate, to do what we need to do, what life asks of us, if we feel that we have nothing to give, if we feel like we're a nothing and Hashem gave us nothing and I'm a nobody and who am I, then I'm not going to step up to the plate when someone needs something. I'm going to say I'm a nobody. Someone else should do it, right? And we're going to feel incapable of doing the things that life expects of us. And therefore, this is truly the reason why the Torah was given on a mountain, but a small mountain, because it's a very, very fine balance, and we constantly have to raise ourselves when we feel too low, and we feel incapable, and we feel unworthy and ungifted, and that Hashem gave us nothing. And we have to remember that's false. Hashem gave everybody gifts that they need to face to make the changes they need in the world. And if I'm seeing something that has to be changed or dealt with in life, then we know that Hashem gave us the kochos. And we actually discussed this in last week's class when the Rebbe said to a teacher that any challenge Hashem gives you, he said in a talk once, any challenge that Hashem gives to any human being, he also gives them the abilities to overcome it. And someone asked the Rebbe, well, what if the person can't overcome it? What about then? And he says, then it's the educator's fault for not complimenting enough. And we spoke about that in Emor, that Emor is the power of speech, for not allowing him to see the greatness he has within him. That his educator should have made him shine, like in Sfirat Omer, right? To Zahir, to make him shine by talking about and letting the child see his greatness within him. So he has the capabilities to overcome it, but the reason he's not is because he was raised in a way that people, rather than making him see the greatness he had inside him, they made him feel too small. And he doesn't realize that he has the potential to overcome this challenge that he has. So we need this, we need to be a har, we need to know the gifts that Hashem gave us, because that's false humility. So being too humble and saying, I have nothing, and we have to understand that anything that we see is hashgacha pratis, that if we see any situation in our lives, if we see another person who needs help, if we read something that needs to be dealt with, if we feel sad by hearing about a tragedy, the fact that I heard about it and not you, the fact that I'm seeing this person who needs help means that I also am given that the reason that I saw it is only to help that situation. I wasn't seeing it just to gossip or just for no reason. If anything that you encounter is meant for your growth in some way, for either you to learn a lesson from or for you to do something about the situation if it needs doing, if there's something to be done about it. And somebody who has a false sense of humility, feeling that God gave him nothing, is lying to himself or is in disillusionment and is feeling too humble at that stage. And therefore, that person needs a little bit more of that pride. He needs to eat. And that's, again, why we don't have matzah all year. Because matzah is not something that chametz is not bad, right? Having too much chametz or having negative arrogance or false arrogance, right, or toxic arrogance, that's evil. But having a sense of pride at the gifts Hashem gave me is very healthy, and that's why all year long we have chametz and we have challah, and on Pesach we cleanse. We want to have 1 week cleanse, but it's not to be done all year long. It's a cleansing that we do to make sure that the chametz that we re-engage with, that when we re-engage with pride, with the gifts Hashem gave us, we come from a healthy place, from only, and here's the balance. So let's talk about the balance, and we're going to talk about Moshe Rabbeinu. So we're now talking about the balance between humility and pride, and knowing our worth, and knowing the greatness that we have. So we go to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, on the one hand, he was the greatest man on the face of the earth, and it also says that there was no man as humble as Moshe on the face of the earth before Hashem, right? That Moshe was the most humble man, and he was the greatest man. Now, do these contradict one another? Could somebody be the greatest person and the humblest person, right? Do they contradict one another? And how could a person retain both? How could somebody be the leader of the Jewish people, talk to God directly daily, right? Split the sea, cause plagues to happen, and then still be the humblest person on the face of earth? Not only that, but the Chachamim even ask, who's the one who wrote in the Torah that there was no man as humble on the face of the earth? Moshe Rabbeinu wrote those words. How could somebody write the words that I am the humblest person and say retain his humility, right? Like that joke that I always say, that the guy said, look who thinks he's humble today. He was like, I'm a nobody, Hashem, I'm nothing, I'm dust, I'm earth. The rabbi comes up, this lowly person comes up and says, Hashem, I'm a nobody, and the shamish, which is the gabbai, and says, look who thinks he's humble today, right? Look who thinks. So humility, talking about your humility, is a sense of arrogance in a way. So how could Moshe write those words in the Torah and yet remain humble, right? How is that not a paradox? So we actually learn that there is a way to have both at the same time, to be the greatest person in the world and to be the humblest person on the face of the earth at the same exact time. And the trick to them both, to the balancing act of both of them and to retaining both, is this: that Moshe, and the question asked really is that, did Moshe not know how great he was? When it says he was the humblest person and he was so humble, what did that mean? Did that mean he didn't know his greatness, right? But he had to know his greatness because he wrote in the Torah that he was the greatest man, right? There was no one like Moshe, no Navi like Moshe in the entire world. And Moshe spoke face to face with Hashem. So was he blind to his greatness? Did he think, and was he kafui tov? Was he like, yeah, it's not that great to talk to Hashem? How could he has to know his greatness, but he also has to be humble. So how can we do that? And I'm not saying, how can somebody know their greatness and yet also be the humblest person? And the trick to that, or the key to that, is knowing one thing, is knowing that, yes, I have so many gifts, and I'm overwhelmed with the amount of greatness that I have inside of me. I have greatness that is beyond comparison, that no one else holds. I have greatness that no one else in the world has. I am unique, and I'm gifted in a way that nobody else can replicate. And at the same time, Moshe Rabbeinu knew all that. He knew that he's the greatest man and he's the leader, but he also knew that it was all from Hashem, that all of the greatness was given to him as a gift from Hashem, and that gift can be taken away, and that A, the gift can be taken away at any moment, and B, that if someone else were to be given all of the greatness that Moshe was given, the wisdom, the knowledge, the nevuah, the prophecy to talk face to face to God, right? The power that Moshe was given. Moshe said, if I know that I'm the greatest man, but if anyone else was given it, they would have done a much better job with it. The only thing that I am is the choices that I make. And if Hashem, you give that to Aaron, he'll do a better job at that. Give it to anyone else but me, and they'll do a better job. So you could know, and that's the key. So knowing that everything is from Hashem is the key, and it's the way to unlock this beautiful balance that we can tell our children and we can tell ourselves that there is no one like me, there is no one else like me, right? Hashem intentionally made that no two humans look identical, not even identical twins. No two people have the same fingerprint. And that is the message that's so important. B'shvilini nivra olam. We wake up and say that I woke up today because there's something I can give to the world that no one else in the world can do. I'm the only one who can do my mission. No one else can do it the way that I do it. People might be able to do great things, but no one can affect the world in the unique way that I am able to do it. And that's why no one shares my fingerprint or my face, right? Exactly. Because no one has, and our face is representative or a reflection of who we are on the inside and the gifts that we have inside of us. And we can say, I woke up today because there is something that I can do, and there's a greatness in me that Hashem knows that only I can do today. And that's why Hashem chose for me to wake up today. And we can at the same time hold the knowledge that it's all a gift from Hashem, and that life can be taken from us in a moment. My gifts can be taken from me in a moment. Everything that makes me tremendous and great, all the greatness that I have within me, whatever my kohos are, if I'm gifted with people, if I'm gifted with my brains, if I'm gifted with my hands, if I'm talented with being a mom, with being a good friend, if I'm good at making people around me feel good, if I'm good at teaching, if I'm good at communicating, right? If I'm good at making space for others, any of those gifts Hashem could take away. Hashem could take away our power of speech, our listening, anything. So if we can retain that humility to know that yes, I am tremendous. Yes, b'shvili nevra olam. Yes, there's no one like me in the world, but at the same time, it's from Hashem. And Hashem, and that makes me so humble to the point that I say that who knows how long I have this gift from Hashem for. I need to do the best I can with it because Hashem could have given it to someone else. So it's an empowering message. The humility shouldn't tear us down and make me feel like, oh, well, I'm a nobody, it's all from Hashem. It should make me say, well, Hashem chose me to give this gift to. Let me do the best I can with the gifts Hashem gave me with the time that I have, because I don't know how much time I have. I don't know how much time I have with the gifts that I'm given. I don't know when, God forbid, I won't have these gifts. So let me make the most of the gifts Hashem gave me. And that's such an empowering message and also humbling message at the same time. And there we can now have the balance. And there's a great chacham, and I can't remember, a great sage that once said that we should all carry 2 pieces of paper in each pocket, right? That we should have in our right pocket the pasuk or the quote of the chachamim, b'shvili nivra olam, that we should all, whenever we need to pick up, whenever we feel less than and we compare ourselves to other people, we remember that the world was created for me, that the world does revolve around you in a way, meaning that your small world revolves around you stepping up to the plate and you doing what you need to do, and knowing that you are created, that even if there's people better at you in everything, there's no one who can do it the way that you can. There's something you can give. And in the left pocket, for when you feel too great and when you did something really successful and you feel like that was all me, right? For those times that when we hopefully, do something great and we build up somebody, or we feel so proud of something that we've done, and when we should be, and we forget for a moment that it's from Hashem, we should have in the left pocket the va'anochi afar ve'efer, right? The pasuk that I am dust and ashes, that I came from dust and ashes, I'm going to return from dust and ashes, to remind us that truly I'm nothing. All I am is that Hashem gives me. And then when we need to feel more capable and to feel empowered, we take out the right paper and read it to ourselves, or visualize it. And when we need to remember that it's all from Hashem, then we take out the left pocket and we read Vanochi Afar Ve'efar. And that way we can constantly have that balance. But truly, it's remembering that everything is from Hashem. So this really answers or helps us understand why the Torah was given on a mountain and not in a valley. Because being in a valley, make a person feeling less than, wouldn't help anybody in the world. It wouldn't help us with our mission. It wouldn't help anyone around us. And that's why the Torah is given on a mountain. But on a mountain that was humble, on a mountain that recognized that if Hashem chooses him, it's it, and it doesn't raise itself. It doesn't have self-pride. It doesn't have that arrogance. So arrogance is bad, but pride and knowing that we are great and that's from Hashem is so beautiful. It's so important. And that's why the Torah was given on a mountain. So now we're going to tie that in So let's pause for a moment. Thank you. No fly. Thank you for watching out for my cup. Thank you very much. I couldn't. So now this actually takes us right back to the Yovel cycle. That's this dichotomy is actually in the Parsha itself. That we asked, so we now know why the name of the Parsha is called Behar, on a mountain, and then it's specifically Har Sinai. But from the two, especially in our times, I think most of us need more to elevate ourselves to be on the Har rather than to bring ourselves down. Because even when, most of us are in a place where we even when we feel good about ourselves, there's so much more times that we feel not enough, that we compare ourselves to other people. And I think that there's no generation that has this problem with comparing ourselves to other people than now. Because 100 years ago, 50 years ago, people didn't even have access to knowing what everyone else, they had their business and their business only, right? They could see what's going on in my life, and I only had myself to compare myself to. I can wake up and say, am I doing the best with my gifts I was given? And it's almost impossible to not see everyone else's successes and everyone else's, because we live in a time when everyone shares their highlights of their life and it's in our face. We have phones. We have never had so much access to one another than before, through our phones, through internet, through social media. Even if we didn't have social media, the access that we have to seeing other people, the fact that we're so mobile that we have cars, we can get to other people's houses with so many more methods of transportation, allows us to look at another person, and every time we look at a window of another person's highlight of their best times, we feel less and less proud of the work that we've done and the growth that we've done. Even if I've grown till here, but I see someone else and it looks like in a moment they did everything I've worked on, they've done in just a day, but we don't get to see everything behind the scenes, right? We're just seeing a flash of their best times. It can really tear us down, and that's the Yetzer Hara of today's generation. The Yetzer Hara is making us feel like we're not enough. There's no point in trying more. That all your successes, that you worked so hard to do this, but don't feel so good about yourself because you're never going to be able to do better. Everyone else is doing better than you, and that's a very, very dangerous Yetzer Hara. So being in a valley is probably the much worse than being on an arrogant mountain. I mean, and this especially nowadays, because at least if you're on an arrogant mountain, you can feel great, and all you need to do is turn on the light bulb to remember that it's all from Hashem. But being in a valley, a person doesn't even try. They feel like, what's the point of even climbing? I can't climb out of this valley. I can't ever get there because there's so many more people doing better than me. Why should I even try? Let them do it, right? Why should I even attempt to be a speaker if there's so many better speakers than I am? Why should I attempt to succeed in this area if everyone else is succeeding so much better? And it can really tear us down. So I think that the Rebbe said, and many times in this generation, we need to use only bringing people up. We need to make sure that we bring ourselves up and only bring ourselves up. So even when we talk about bringing on the left side, right? We always said the right side is chesed, the left side is gvura. Even when we talk about humility and saying we're nothing, in fact, I think that that's actually a lesson in, that's also a way to elevate ourselves as well. And it's a lesson from the Yovel as well. So the there's two beautiful teachings that seem like they're the opposite about the reason for the Yovel, for the national reset, for like the entire world resetting, right? Resetting and everything returning to its original owners. The first lesson is the Chinuch. The Chinuch is an anonymous author of a sefer on mitzvahs. And he teaches that what is the deeper reason for the Yovel? That Hashem, it's a lesson for humility, right? Just that Hashem wants us to remember that just like that everything ultimately belongs to him, and therefore everything's controlled by Hashem, and therefore a person, as they conduct business and acquire wealth, right, and property, and they start to buy things, they might feel self-important and feel like, I've got this, who needs Hashem anymore, right? I'm a self-made man, right? When someone begins to feel like a self-made man, or to feel too great, then Hashem instituted Yovel so the person can constantly remember that ultimately you don't own anything. Everything returns to its original owner. Just like in Shmittah, a person can work the land and feel so much that it's their effort that made the food grow. That my food is because of my efforts. What do you mean, God? Who did the planting? I did. I'm the one who planted. I'm the one who grew it. I'm the one who plowed it. I'm the one who made this food. It's me. And they forget that they even need Hashem's blessing. They forget to ask Hashem, to pray to Hashem, right? They forget to thank Hashem because they really feel, because of the way that it actually is, that we worked the land and we grew the land, and therefore it's my efforts that created this. And that is where the arrogance is flawed. And that is where the mistake is, because a person has to remember that even the greatest farmer, the person who has the most successful farmer, can grow and plant and put in all his expertise into place, and he can have the best machines, but if Hashem doesn't want him to grow anything, nothing will grow. He'll have a year that nothing grew. And there can be somebody who is very bad at farming, has no experience, but he plants and there's a blessing in the earth and so much grows. And in today's terms, right, there could be somebody who works at business, who's a successful businessman who who graduated from the top business schools, and it tries to start a business and it just doesn't take off. And there can be somebody who didn't go to business school, who dropped out of school, never went to high school, right? And it can be tremendously successful without any experience, because it's all Hashem. That whether we're successful or not is not because of our effort. It's not because I plowed the land in olden day terms, or because I started the business. Hashem wants to give you money, he'll give you money. You making the effort is what Hashem wants us to do, because Hashem wants us to be in this world and Sheishes Yamim Tavo, to work for 6 years, to engage with the world, to engage with the earth, to engage with the land, right? To be involved with the physical world so that we can have bring godliness into the physical environment. But the success is not ever equal to our investments, right? It's never that this is how much work you put in, so that's exactly how much success you're going to have. No time ever has it been exactly proportionate. There can be somebody who puts in very little effort and has tremendous success, and there can be somebody who puts in tremendous effort. We know so many people who are such hard workers who just don't have atzlacha, because atzlacha is from Hashem. Whether their success in their endeavors is purely from Hashem. And Hashem conceals it in a way that it looks like it's our efforts in order to give us free choice, to be the ones to choose to daven to Hashem, to pray, and to be thankful and grateful, and to remind us of this, and to humble us, and to give us this, not humble us in a bad way, but to gift us with the reminders that to remember that it's from Hashem, so that we can turn to the one who is truly from, and we can enjoy true success. Hashem instituted Shmittah, so that every 6 years, a farmer who starts to think that, it's all me, and forgets that he needs Hashem's bracha, he's helpless. He has nothing to do. He has to rely. It's the craziest thing. For 3 years, he has to rely on complete trust in Hashem. Hashem will feed him and provide for him, right? Because why is it 3 years? The sixth. Why in the 6th year again?
The year after Shmittah.
The whole 7th year he can't grow, he can't, and then the whole 8th year he can't, right? So I guess it's, and only in the 8th year he can start plant, right? No, but I remember there was part of the 6th year as well. I don't remember. Anyways, so he has to rely on Hashem that for at least 2 years, right? He's going to be relying completely on Hashem's brachos, and then he remembers, wait a minute, Hashem's the one who provides for me, right? Hashem is giving me a chance now to rest, to let my land rest, to let my land replenish itself, right? To give ourselves a Shabbos, just like we need a rest once a week, our earth needs a rest, and we need to rest and remember to be able to give it up and submit it all to Hashem. And Yovel was the same idea, that if a person starts to feel that his acquisitions make him important and him great, Hashem humbles him and reminds him and gives us the gift to recognize that he doesn't have to rely on himself all the time. You don't have to feel like it's all on you. You can take the burden off of your shoulders and remember that ultimately Hashem is the one who's giving you all your hatzlacha. So it's a chance to, it's also a time to humble a person, to make them remember that it's all from Hashem, and that's what the chinuch says. So we understand how it's to give us more humility. Now on the other side, completely, the Ralbag, Rebbe Levi ben Gershon, he says the exact opposite. He says Yovel is not only, he doesn't say that Yovel is to humble the arrogant person who feels that his success is his. He says that, think about it from the perspective of the slaves. A person or someone who had to sell his property, who's only his home that he had to live in. He has nowhere to live, right? Or somebody who had to sell himself as a slave is somebody who's usually very poor. The reason he had to sell his home and his property is because he doesn't have enough money and he's not successful and he doesn't have a tzlacha. And a person who had to sell themselves as a slave to repay something is usually someone who's really poor and destitute. And a person like that can lose hope of ever being successful again, and they can feel that they're just on a spiral downwards, that it just goes downhill from now. How could I ever be successful again? How can I ever have anything if I'm forced to sell my home? I have nowhere to live, I have nowhere to, I'm just a slave. And they can envision themselves just going downhill from there, and they can lose hope. And to prevent the person from losing hope, Hashem instituted Yovel as an opportunity, right? And that if a person ever becomes so desperate that he has to sell himself or his child as a slave, or sell his home, that he doesn't have to despair because it's only temporary. There's light at the end of the tunnel, that it will be returned to him no matter what, that he will be free from slavery and his home will be returned to him, and he always has a way to climb out of it, and he can start again. There's a reset, that this is just temporary, and you can reset your life at the Yovel year. You can start completely scratch. You won't be a slave, you'll have your home again, and you can begin again. So it's to bring up a person to know that even if they weren't successful, that it's a reminder constantly that even if they don't even have to wait for the Yovel year to start building themselves up, because they know that it's not forever. They can say, let me start now. If I can build myself up then, I can build myself up now. My stage of being unsuccessful, or my stage of lowliness, doesn't have to be forever, right? I doesn't have to be tied to who I am at my core, because at my core, I'm a free person. At my core, I have land that belongs to me, and I can build myself out of here, and I can have hope to be greater in the future. And so it's the opposite. It's a lesson in pride. It gives a person a sense of pride to know, and a sense of lifting themselves up from a dark place, right? And we all know a time, I guess, at least I do, right? And personally, when I wasn't feeling my greatest, right? When I was feeling much lower than I've ever been, and I felt like other people can do what I'm doing much better than I can, right? Why even teach? There's been many times in the past, and even now sometimes, that I feel like, why teach? There's just videos online of people who teach so much greater, right? There's so many teachers in Efrat. Let someone else teach. Why should I teach, right? And there's so many times when we feel life pulling us down more often than building us up, right? For me at least, there's more times that I'm feeling like, what's the point of trying, than my greatness is mine, right? Although they both come in balance. And the reminder is when we're spiraling downwards and we feel like we're at a really, really low, that not only is the Yovel remind us that we can climb out of it, but even deeper, I think that they're not even opposites. I think that knowing that everything is from Hashem, that even my successes are from Hashem, is the deepest reminder that even when I give an amazing shir and I give an amazing talk and I come out feeling so proud of myself, and I tell myself, and someone compliments me, what do I say? What do you say? Baruch Hashem, thank you Hashem, right? It was all Hashem. And even if I could be humbled in that way, that all my successes, when I am successful, when I am on a high, when I did an amazing program, when something was extremely successful and tons of people came, I'm getting tons of messages on how successful it was, if I am humbled and to remember that it was not my success, but it was rather Hashem's success, then that's supposed to actually lift me up to know that when I give a talk and no one shows up, or one person shows up, or I give a talk and afterwards I feel like I botched up that speech, right? I didn't prepare enough and I feel bad about myself. I came really late. When I'm feeling like I made a program and it didn't go so well, or not enough people came, and why aren't people coming? Then I can use that same exact response, that just like when I'm successful and something goes so well, and I can say, and I should say, that it's all Hashem, because I could try and no one will show up, and I could try harder, right? And I could try harder and no one will show up, and I could try very little and it'll be tremendously successful. I can apply that same thing to when I fail, when I fall on my back, when no one shows up. I can say, that's Hashem. I did my part, right? I have to make my hishtadlut. I have to do my part. And the failing or being successful, whether I'm successful, whether the program fails, whether people show up, that's not my part. That's Hashem's. So I can feel lifted. I can feel uplifted and say, Hashem wanted it to be this way. So it's not on me. That's on you, Hashem, right? Baruch Hashem. I did my part, and I could put that on Hashem. The failure was on Hashem's part, right? He could have get people to come to this shiur, right? That's not me, because truly everything is from Hashem. All of the hatzlacha, the outcome is from Hashem. The effort is mine. So all I can do is lift myself up on knowing, did I do the best I can? If I didn't, I'll do better next time, right? But the success doesn't have to weigh on my shoulders. I can take the burden of the outcome off of me, and take the burden of the outcome and place it on Hashem. So ultimately, when the times I'm feeling low, both of the messages will work as well. If I'm feeling low about myself, and I can tell myself, and we can tell ourselves that that everything is ultimately from Hashem, and that to have that hope that everything will return back to how it was, and Hashem can turn things around in a moment, both of them could lift us up. So ultimately, the idea of Behar and Kosai, the balance between humility, the answer to everything, and the answer to Yovel, is to truly remember that the message to Yovel, the message of Shmittah in this week's Parsha, the message of Behar, of the Torah being given on the mountain, all of the key, or the message of everything, is to recognize and to be able to look beyond the physical, because physically it seems like it's all us. It seems like it's all our efforts. It seems like the failures are ours and the successes are ours. That the planting of the food is ours. That whether I bring home a lot of money this month, or I sell a house, if I'm a realtor agent, whatever it is that I do, if it's successful, it feels like it's my efforts. But if we can look deeper, and if we had eyes to see how things are, and if we had X-ray vision, we would see that it has nothing to do, because ultimately Hashem decided on Rosh Hashanah, before you were born, before you were created, exactly how much money you're going to make this month, right? It was decided way before. And when we could see that, and the efforts that we put are because we're supposed to work the world. Hashem wants us to work for 6 years, to work for 6 days a week, in order that we engage with people, and that we engage with physical objects, that we come out, and that we use the physical things in our possession and in our environment to draw godliness into the world, so we can make the world a place that reflects godliness. And it's nothing to do with the outcome. And when we can see that, it is such an inspiring, message. Because if we can have that extra vision to see it how it looks from Hashem, I guess God vision, right? Then we let go, and there's so much less on our shoulders. We take it off of our shoulders and we give it over to Hashem. There's a story about Rebbetzin, and I've shared this story before. It's adorable. The story of Rebbetzin goes like this. Every morning, Rebbetzin would look up to the heavens after he finished davening, and he would say, Hashem, your child, Rebbetzin, is hungry. Dayingalet Susha is hungry. Please give me something to eat. Like, can I please have something to eat? Hashem, send me something to eat. And then on cue, his shamish, his personal assistant, would appear with breakfast and give him breakfast. And right, and he would say, "Thank you, Hashem." Now, one day, the shamish was he hated this, right? He's like, I'm not playing this game anymore. So Zusha turns up to Hashem. He says, "Hashem, your son is hungry. Please give me food." And then I show up with the food. Like, I'm playing this game. Like, I'm the one bringing him food. What do you mean he's davening to Hashem? Let him thank me, not thank Hashem. I'm sure he said thank you to the shamish, but what is he playing this game for? He says, "You know what? Tomorrow I'm not making him breakfast. He could. Well, wait for Hashem to give him breakfast. Let's see who answers him." The next day, Zusha looks up to the heavens. He says, "Hashem, dein Yingele, dein Kind, Reb Zusha is hungry. Please, can you give me something to eat?" And the shamish, just sitting there, he's not bringing breakfast. He's in another room. He's just laughing to himself, saying, "We're going to show him who actually brings him breakfast." At that moment, there's a knock at the door. A man shows up and says, "I had a bris this morning, and I have a lot of extra food, and I want to give it to Reb Zusha." And at that moment, the shamish turned white, and he realized the greatest thing that a person can ever realize, that the food was always from Hashem. Hashem was sending Reb Zusha breakfast. I happen to be the channel that Hashem chose to give Reb Zusha breakfast. I chose not to be that channel, the messenger for this tzaddik. Hashem chose another channel. But it's crazy, because if we can have that moment of clarity and realize that with or without our work, Hashem will give everything in creation exactly what it needs to get, right? With or without competition. It would eliminate so much of our worries and anxieties, right? We have so much anxieties, especially we know the anxieties of not having a home, right? If anyone is renting, not having a permanent home, we know that anxiety, we know that worry. And when we know that the market is competitive, when we have competitors selling the same things that we're selling, it feels we're so stuck in this rat race and feeling like we need to make our success. We need to make sure that we have a home. And when we can realize that Hashem is the one sending us exactly what we need, and the channels will change, right? Whoever it is, that can change, that can go away. It doesn't matter, right? The channels are what Hashem picks to be the channel. Hashem will find us another way. Hashem has enough homes for everyone in the world to live in, right? We can rest assured and know that even if somebody bought the last house, Hashem will find a way, right, for you to have a home that you need to live in. It's all from Hashem, and it's very hard to attune ourselves. And Rabbi Jacobson once said this story, and he said if we sat there and looked at Hashem and said, "Give me breakfast," we'd probably be sitting hungry for a really, really long time, right? Because coming with that desire needs the complete emunah that Rabbi Zusha had to know that ultimately all of his bracha and shefa comes straight from Hashem, not right. And he was able to see that so clearly, and he knew that my shamash is the one Hashem chooses, but Hashem will send me another way, right? And if we can work really hard to attune ourselves to that and to get into that vision and knowing that ultimately everything is from Hashem, then we'll start to realize how so many of the mitzvos are designed to allow us to reflect back Hashem's vision, right? When we take a piece of challah, it's to remember that even though we made this challah and we made this bread, that it's from Hashem. Without Hashem's blessing, we have nothing. When we make a bracha before we eat, when we say thank you to Hashem, all of it's to remember that everything that we have, although it feels like it's ours, it's from Hashem, and especially for the negative. If we mess up, it's from Hashem. Not if we mess up. If something doesn't work out well in our favor, that's okay. That's from Hashem. That's what Hashem wanted. That's where you're meant to be. Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz teaches us about trusting Hashem. Yitzi Horowitz is a Chabad shaliach who was very gifted. He played guitar. He was inspiring. He went around to many people and brought them so much simcha and joy. He created songs, and he was diagnosed with ALS at least 10 years ago. And he lost all of his capacity to do everything that he felt was his gift to the world. He can't talk. He can't do anything. The only communication he has is he's laying in a bed for the last 10 or more years, and all he can do is move his eyes. And through his eyes, he writes articles, and he writes Divrei Torah. And we know that each letter that he writes, each word can take him a couple of minutes. So I actually have a few, and every week I read his articles because they're so inspiring. And knowing that every word is chosen, right, with his eyes and the way he writes it. And one thing he shared about this week's Parsha is so beautiful. He says that every one of us have a relationship with Hashem, right? Even atheists have a relationship with Him. The fact that they don't believe in God is their relationship with God. And our relationship with God is like a relationship with any other significant other, right? It has ups and downs. Anyone who tells you they have a relationship with their significant other that's always like this, it's not a real relationship. Either they're lying to you or the relationship doesn't exist, right? A relationship always has its good days and its bad days. And a relationship with Hashem has its good days and its bad days. And some of us have our good years and our bad years. And we have ups and downs, right? We have ups and downs. For some time, we have a very strong relationship with Hashem. Some of us have a relationship with Hashem where we feel like God rejected us, that Hashem rejected us and doesn't, and cast us away and doesn't care for us and doesn't give to us, right? Most of us run the roller coaster of ups and downs, of turning to Hashem and feeling betrayed by Hashem, feeling rejected by Hashem, this roller coaster ride with Hashem. But what we need to remember, says Yitzi Horowitz, is that what Hashem wants from us the most, from everything that Hashem asks of us, what He wants the most is for us to trust Him. that's what he asks us from everything. At the core of most mitzvahs, is Hashem is saying, I want you to trust me. Because truly at the core of every relationship between two loving people who have the ups and downs and the good days and the bad days and the good years and the bad years, all right, and the time when we feel rejected by our partners or loved by our partners, is at the end of the day, what builds the basis of everything is trust. Right? And we hear that. And what is that trust? That trust that is that I can rely on this person, that I can take it off my shoulders and trust fully that this person that I'm in a close relationship with wants the best for me. That I trust them when I feel safe and closest to a person is when I know that they want the best for me, that they only will do the best they can for me, that I trust that they have the best intentions. And that way, even when they mess up and they don't do the best, that trust that they would only want the best for me, that they did their best in that situation, allows me to forgive, allows us to repair. It allows me to feel safe and be close because I trust that ultimately this person wants the best for me. And in relationship with human beings, often we give our trust to the wrong people, right? Sometimes the more we trust somebody, the more we realize that we should never have trusted them in the beginning because they didn't have our best intentions in mind, right? That they weren't a person who was trustworthy, who was deserving of our trust. And sometimes relationship with a human being allows us to, and the more we trust a beloved person, the more we realize that we should have trusted them even more from the beginning. The more we realize that the more we trust them, the more that person deserves our trust. And that trust allows us, the more we lean into that trust, the more it allows us to connect in a deeper way, right? And with Hashem, what Hashem asks us from everything, at the core of everything, is no matter what our relationship with Hashem looks like, Hashem asks us to increase our trust in Him. And with our relationship with Hashem, no matter, it always works the way that the more we trust Hashem, and the more we lean into that scary trust and lean into the fact that Hashem wants the best for us, and we lean in and let go and say, Hashem, I'm letting go and letting you take over this and letting you take over the results, the more safe we feel, the more Hashem gives us, the more Hashem takes off our plate, and the more close we feel to Hashem. And it always works that way. The more we trust in Hashem, the closer our relationship will get, and the more safe we'll feel in this relationship. If we can truly lean into that scary feeling of letting go and saying, Hashem, I'm not going to worry about this. For example, if somebody needs to get married and they can truly say, I'll do my part, but the worrying, the making sure it happens, that's on you, Hashem. And the more we can lean into that scary feeling of letting go, and in everything that we need in our life, to say, I need a home, I need to pay the rent, but I'm going to do my part of making my kelim and lean in and let go and say, Hashem, I'm putting this on you. The more we lean in and take it off, the more Hashem takes that responsibility off of us. And we say this clearly in Pirkei Avot that we're learning now. We say that if we take on the Ol of Torah, then Hashem takes on the role of Ol of Derech Eretz. And the more we take on the Ol of Derech Eretz, which means making a living and thinking that we're the ones who needs to provide for ourselves, then the more Hashem takes it off of Him. Then Hashem, it says we take off the Ol of Torah, which means like trusting in Hashem, then Hashem gives us the Ol of Derech Eretz. And it's not the same for everybody. The how much the burden is on us is how much we decide to give it up to Hashem. The same way with a person. If we're worrying about ourselves, then and we're worrying about things, right? It's like they always say, don't pay the bills. If you want your husband to pay the bills, right? Never look at the bills, never talk to him about it, never remind him about it, because the more you take it on yourself to remind him, the less he'll feel the responsibility and do it, right? This is an old-fashioned way of looking at it, right? Because now we know anyone could do the bills. But in the olden days, I remember the message was that if you want your partner or your beloved to do something, the more you remind them to do it, the more they're going to feel less responsible to take it upon themselves. And with Hashem actually works that way with us. The more that we worry about things, Hashem says, I see you're worrying about it. You know what? I don't have to worry so much about it because you got it taken care of. You're working your parnasa all day and night. What do I have to worry about it? You've got it covered, right? And when we say, Hashem, listen, I'm not worrying about it. I'll do my part, but this is your problem, not mine, because I'm worrying about Torah and raising your children and being a good person in this world. I'm worrying about God things. You worry, but then Hashem worries about my things, right? And we actually learn that in the three-way partnership in raising a child, it says that we're responsible for the child. The responsibilities are that the parents take care of the child's ruchnius. You would think it's the opposite. You would think that the division, because it says that it takes 3 people to make a child, and we know that, because 2 people can try to make a child, and without God's blessing, they won't have a child, right? And without the 2 people, Hashem could try, but they need to have a child. So the division of responsibilities is the opposite of what you think. The Hashem entrusts us to take care of the child's spiritual life, not their physical life. And Hashem then, even though we're the ones who end up doing it, but taking care of whether the child has enough physically, enough happiness, enough health, all the health of the child, the success of the child, the money that we need to raise the child, that's all from Hashem. That's Hashem provides if we provide do our part of providing for the ruchnius of the child, creating an environment where the child it has emunah in Hashem and trust in Hashem, and teaching him doing our part of educating the child in the ways of the Torah and the ways of the mitzvos and in all the ways Hashem wants us to. And then Hashem says, I'm going to do my part. You do your part, right? You let go. But if you start worrying about my part, right, then I don't have to do it. If we start worrying and being responsible for all the child's health and making it our responsibility, even though we still do our part, but the responsibility of who ultimately health comes from and where parnasa comes from is only from Hashem. And there this magical thing happens that's our this becomes clear. It's in a magic way that the approach we have with Hashem is different in our trust issues with Hashem. Right, we all have trust issues with Hashem. Why should I trust Hashem? He failed me, God forbid, so many times. Right, so many of us have been hurt. But the more we get to know Hashem, the more we learn about Hashem, the stronger our trust gets. And we realize that Hashem is truly the only one that we can trust at the end of the day. Like we say, don't rely on men. We say this over and over in Tehillim, that I can't rely on men. We're so used to relying on other people. And when we slowly realize that truly people, even if they're a trustworthy person, a person can't be relied on because they're mortal. They can't always step up to the plate for us. Even the most trustworthy person that we would trust our life with, we can't fully rely on them because they're a mortal person that can not necessarily always deliver what they promise because of physical limitations, because they're a mortal person who won't be here forever. But Hashem is always here for us. And the more we learn about that, the more our trust grows. And especially as parents, right, we feel this. And this is where we see this the most during Shmittah, right? A person would think that naturally the land has been drained for 5 years or 6 years, right, of planting, and the 6th year comes, there's nothing left, right? You think there's nothing left for the field to give in the 7th year. And it's only our trust in Hashem that, I think, are we not supposed to plant already? The 6th year, we're not already supposed to plant, right? I think that we're ready from the Shvat of the 6th year, we can't plant. I think that's why I said 3 years. That we have to trust in Hashem, that the more we rely less on nature and more on Hashem, we realize that ultimately everything's from Hashem, and we get even more. We have not only does the 6th year not produce less after 5 years, the 6th year ends up being able to sustain us for 3 years. It gives us enough for the 6th year, because that's the year we're eating, and it gives us enough to store food for the 7th year, and then beginning of the 8th year until we start planting, right? Enough grows from the 8th year of planting. So it's crazy, and when we rely on Hashem, we realize this happens, and as parents as well, right? How many times as parents we feel like we have nothing left to give, right? We gave and gave and gave, and it's the end of the day or the beginning of the day, and I'm done, right? And as parents, we feel this, and when we feel like we're completely done, there is no way we're going to give. And sometimes we have no choice because we have hungry children coming home, and they need a hug, and they need to be cleaned, and they need to be fed, and they need to be sustained, and we have nothing left to give. And when we turn to Hashem, which I've done many times, and I say, Hashem, give me kochos. I need kochos because I have nothing left. My husband's away, right? I have no one else to turn to. He's at work. He's not in town. There's only me. And I pray to Hashem, and I get these kochos again. It happens every time. Suddenly, I'm not like, wow, I'm energized, I could do this, but somehow I'm able to push through and give more, right? From somewhere in me comes more kochos. And the Rebbe promised this to parents who, there was never a push to have more and more children until later on in the Rebbe's leadership, suddenly became this big campaign to keep having children, because the Zohar says that when all the souls are born in the world, Mashiach will come. So in the effort to hasten Mashiach, that's where Chabad families started having more children. Before that, Chabad families had 3-4 children, 2-3-4 children, right? Like everyone else, 3-4, as many as they could handle. And the Rebbe started to push and they said, well, we can't handle our kids as it is. Forget about money, right? Money is one thing from Hashem. But the kochos, we're barely surviving. I'm drained. How am I going to have kochos for more children? And the Rebbe said that with more children, Hashem will give you more kochos. You have the kochos that you have now, because that's how many kochos you need. You're finishing it all in your children. But if you have more children, Hashem will give you more kochos. And people, because the Rebbe was talking to them directly, were like, okay, if the Rebbe's promising it, we'll do it. And they started to have like 10, 11. My mother-in-law had 16 children because she heard the Rebbe say it. She was never planning to have 16 children, but the Rebbe promised that with every child, you'll get more kochos, you'll get more parnasa from Hashem, because ultimately, all your kochos are already, it's already crazy how much kochos we have in one day. It's already supernatural. When you're a mom at the end of the day and you're taking care of your 3 children, right? It's not normal and natural how much energy you've invested. It's not akin to the amount of intake you took for yourself. The amount that you put out is not natural. It's supernatural. So if it's supernatural already, we can lean in to trust Hashem, that Hashem will give us more kochos. Now, I'm not saying that I have this trust that, that the woman then who heard it from the Rebbe had, and that I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll just have 10 more. And I wish I had that trust that I could lean in and say, Hashem will give me more kochos, because I'm like, I'm dead. I'm dead by like 8 p.m., right? Like, oh, God forbid. But I'm like drained. I don't have energy to get up, right? After the end of the day, like, how could I have more kids? Where am I going to get the energy from? But the Rebbe says, remember that the Hashem is not limited, that anyways it's supernatural. Being a mom is supernatural. It's not even normal, the things that we do, especially working moms. Now when we work, we take care of ourselves, and we're doing it in a way, especially in Israel, when most of us are doing it without our parents' help, right? In the olden days, everyone lived with their parents helped them. Most of us are doing it on our own here. We don't have our parents helping us out every day. So it's already supernatural. So we see that we give and give and give until there's nothing left, and then Hashem gives us strength that we didn't even imagine that we had to just keep going. So I personally, as a mom, have experienced this firsthand, where I'm like, I have nothing left, but when my husband goes out of town, suddenly Hashem gives me more kochos, right? It gives me both of our kochos, because I do things that when he's in town, I cannot do. I just don't have the energy to do it, but when he's away, I suddenly do have the energy to do it, and it's not natural. I can't explain it, because it's not like I can pull up that when he is here. When he's here, I can't. But it is a super, we all moms have experienced it firsthand. So the message that I guess I want to end up with is that, yeah, let us all choose to lean more into Hashem's trust. And we'll end up with this joke story. There's a man, very short, there's a man, my favorite story of all time. There's a man who's in a wagon. He's traveling to his Rebbe, and he gets a hitchhike, right? There's no cars yet, right? So a man in his wagon stops and says, where are you going? He says, I'm going to visit my Rebbe. He says, do you want to ride? I'm going there too. He says, sure. So the man's in the back seat, they're chatting, and after like 2 hours of driving, the driver, his host, right, his hitchhiker, his kremper, looks in the back, and he sees the man in the back carrying his huge suitcase on his lap. He says, dude, what are you doing? I'm driving you. Why don't you put your suitcase down? And the man says, listen, I feel so bad. You're already carrying me and schlepping me all the way to the Rebbe. I don't want you to have to carry my suitcase as well. So I'm holding it on my lap, right? And the ridiculousness of that is echoed in our actions, right? Hashem is carrying us anyways, right? And so often this man felt like, I'm carrying my suitcase. I don't want you to have to burden it, but you're carrying it anyways. Hashem's carrying our pekalach anyways, our suitcase, our baggage, our worries. Hashem is carrying it for us. Who do you think is worrying about us? Hashem is worrying about all of our kochos, all of our parnasa, all of our health. Hashem is worrying about that. He's worrying for us. He's taking care of it. It's all planned. And us continuing to hold on to those worries and carry them and worry, what am I going to eat in the 6th year? What am I going to eat tomorrow? Right? If I don't plant more, if I don't do more work, if I don't work harder, I can't go home to my family because I need to work harder. And Hashem says, you're so silly. This is ridiculous. He looks around and he says, why are you carrying your bag? And he says, well, I don't want you to have to worry about Hashem. But Hashem, it's ridiculous because he's carrying it all for us. So let us all lean into that trust and be able to put our bags down, put the worry off of us, and only focus on the things that matter the most, right? Making the best choices we can, lifting ourselves up, and doing the best we can every single day with the amazing kochos Hashem gave us. See you next week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here in person. If you enjoyed, you can like, comment. It gives me so much chizuk when I know that other people are watching it as well. And feel free to share it with anyone who you think would enjoy it. Have a wonderful Shabbat and week.
You too. I don't remember what show you were talking about, the kid who always says no.